Hey, Obenda parents, it's Leah. I have Rachel with Quinlan Tarot here for our workshop today. We're going to be talking all about tarot as an incredible intuitive tool for kids and helping your kids to learn to explore the cards and get comfortable with them and really help them be able to tune in and trust all of those inner urges, that inner guidance that they get, and to help get that validation from the tarot cards. So Rachel, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
Thanks. We've already had some really awesome talks doing some of our mini videos that we'll release out after the workshop today. So I'm really excited to dive in a little bit deeper with the workshop here. Start by telling us a little bit of the history of tarot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the history of tarot, like many things, is very shrouded and mysterious. But what we do know is that it probably originated in Europe several hundred years ago. Some people say it may have even had its origins in Egypt. Some people think it may have come from Korea or China with origins in the I Ching. The tarot deck, which is a little bit different than an oracle deck, which we'll talk about later, the tarot deck consists of two main parts. So one part of it sort of looks like a regular deck of playing cards.
Mm-hmm.
There's suits in it, just like clubs and hearts and diamonds. The tarot has swords and wands and pentacles or discs and cups. And then just like a deck of cards where you would have a king and a queen, we have kings and queens and pages. So there's some of parts of the tarot that would look very familiar to anyone who's ever played with a deck of playing cards. And then there's a second part of the tarot. It's divided into two parts called the major arcana and the minor arcana.
Okay.
And arcana means mysteries. So these are the minor mysteries and the major mysteries. There's a second part to the tarot that talks about really big life issues, and it's told in symbols like the moon, the sun, the stars, the wheel of fortune. So these are the two parts of the deck that come together as one. It really got popular in America, kind of in the 20s and 30s. They were used with mystery schools, starting in England around World War II, and made their way over to America. We are lucky now to be living in a renaissance of tarot decks. Everybody is coming out with a new tarot deck all of the time. It's a wonderful opportunity for independent artists to be creating their own decks. Tarot decks are a little bit different than oracle card decks, but both of them are used to get messages about ourselves, about the future, about our past, and about what's going on in our present state and how we can use it to move forward in the most effective ways.
I love that. And I have noticed there is a huge renaissance, and you're really starting to see the overlap between people who are just energy workers, healers, intuitives, and artists, and how much those two worlds really overlap quite a bit.
It's absolutely beautiful to see different expressions. And some of these decks were made hundreds of years ago, so people can't always relate to a bunch of old rich white dudes depicted in cards. So now we're having a lot more representation, intersectionality in our decks, and it's beautiful to see because there's a deck out there for everyone.
Absolutely. And I also love how there's a lot more attention to helping kids have intuitive tools as well. Like I think it was who was it that came up with the angel cards for kids? It's like a teeny tiny little tarot deck for kids.
I think Doreen Virtue.
Doreen Virtue.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's teeny tiny. It's beautiful for kids who are really, really young. And it's the perfect size for their little hands, and it's all really positive messages. So there's a lot of ways to really introduce your kids to tarot. I felt like when my kids had outgrown that deck, we ended up getting the Good Tarot by, I think it's Colette Baron Reid, where it's tarot that has just kind of like only good news in it. So there's some days we don't want to deal with having to dig too deep. We just want little light, happy, lifting us up kind of stuff. So there's a lot of different tarot for a lot of different purposes. Absolutely. Okay. So we are going to now dive into, sorry guys, just checking my notes, dive a little bit more into using the tarot. We talked a little bit about archetypes and symbols, which you're going to go into a little bit more. But then like the really cool storytelling aspect of tarot.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So one of the reasons I think tarot is great for kids is because at its essence, tarot is about telling stories. So a lot of us, especially as adults, we think we have to have all of the information. Like I need to read these 5 books and take 2 classes before I can even begin to practice whatever it is I need to practice. The great thing about kids is they don't think any of that stuff. You can start flipping over cards and start telling a story based on what's happening in the cards. Every card is a picture, and there's something happening in the picture. And children are so innately creative and curious. So we can flip over a card and say, okay, this is the lover's card. And kids might go, ooh.
Right. Or they'll be like, ew.
Gross. But we can say, okay, there's two people here. What are the
Mm.
two people doing?
Mm.
Oh, well, they're in a garden. Okay, what do you think they're doing in the garden? And as we start talking about this, and as we start telling stories, this is how I learned to tell the tarot.
Mm.
I flip over cards and someone will ask me a question. What am I doing with my life? Should I take this job? Should I move across the world? And I'm going, I don't know what you should do. But then you flip over the cards and the messages start coming through the images, through the stories. And one thing that we've talked about a little bit before this was how much the pictures in a traditional tarot are like fairy tales.
Mm-hmm.
So in a fairy tale, we have a queen and we have a king and we have a cave and we have maybe a wicked witch or a bad guy, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And in the tarot, these are all symbols that we recognize and that we can relate to. The first card in the deck is the Fool. And the Fool isn't a stupid person. It's somebody that's starting out on a journey, and they have their sack over their back and their little dog at their feet, and they feel totally careless and excited about the world. And that's everybody in the beginning of a fairy tale. You're starting out on a journey. You're Dorothy in Oz. You're starting out on the yellow brick road. So we can recognize these symbols because they're permeated in our Western culture. We know what a king represents. We know what an empress represents. What does the stars represent? So in the tarot deck, the card of the star represents hope. It's that guiding light in the darkness. When we feel like we don't have a direction, we can look up into the stars and say, oh, they're our guiding star. So these are symbols that are in our culture that exist in the collective unconsciousness of everybody. So little kids can, and big kids and adults can start using these symbols to tell stories about their lives, about what's happening. And in a really beautiful way, that's how we kind of can connect to sort of the deeper well of intuition that we all possess.
And I think too, on that note, hearing you talk about the picture symbology and everything, I mean, since the beginning of time, man has used pictures to tell stories. So it seems so apropos that this universal language of the symbology and the pictures and cards would not only be so perfect for children, since oftentimes children are not reading until, or at least fluently until second or third grade, but that even people from different languages can also understand and trust these symbols in the tarot. It's really lovely.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things I love about it, as we're telling stories, we can get outside of our own head. Because if you're talking with your child about a problem that they're having, and it's like, well, what's happening with you and the bully? It may prevent us from really sharing our feelings. But if we can hold up a card of a young person, the pages, by the way, represent young people in the tarot deck. If we can hold up a card of a young person and say, okay, so this page of pentacles, and pentacles just means discs or coins, he's traveling down this road and we see a card that comes up that maybe validates he's having trouble with a bully. We could say, well, what do you think, how does the page of pentacles feel about that? What do you think the page of pentacles would do if this happened? And it can really allow kids to get outside of themselves and put themselves into a story where they can explore different options that they may not have felt that they had before.
That's really awesome. I know we were talking earlier about how kids just love small play. And I know my younger daughter, who's 6, she will just dig out all of her little dolls and toys, and she'll disappear for hours just playing with all of her small play. But I haven't explored the tarot in that way with her. So I'm curious now, if I just left her with the tarot cards, if she would do that same thing like she does with the small play and just create these stories. And have you heard of people doing that with?
Oh, it's fantastic. And I've done it with children quite a bit. I had a little boy pull out the card of the magician, and the magician has his hands in the air and he's wearing this red cape, and he latched onto the cape. That's me, and I'm wearing a cape, and here I am, and I'm running around, and okay, well, what does the magician do? He makes magic, he has power. So it was a very empowering thing for him to do. One of the things I love too, I have a niece, and she's 9 or 10, and she asked, she knows that I'm a tarot card reader, and she's told all her friends that that's what she wants to be when she grows up. Yes. And she came up to me one day and she said, I'm going to read your tarot cards. And I said, great, read me my tarot. And bless her, she doesn't know any of the meanings of the cards. And she starts flipping things over, and she pulls the Emperor card. And the Emperor in the tarot is a universal symbol for fatherhood and fathers. And she pulled a couple other cards, and she said, you have a really close relationship with your father. I'm going, yes, I do. As a matter of fact,
that's pretty amazing.
And then she started, and I was flabbergasted that she gave me a very accurate reading.
Just based off the pictures.
Just based off the pictures. And
it's pretty awesome.
The beauty of this with adults, with children, is we get outside of our own heads. Our ego is always telling us, that's wrong, don't do this, don't do this. But the cards are pushing us along a path of our intuition. And so often I'll draw cards and I'll be working with the client and I'll go, that can't be right. That doesn't mean what I think it means. And my ego starts telling me, no, don't say that. That's not right. But the cards are there and they're giving you information. And so when you trust that information, you can really tap into your intuition. Our collective unconscious is this big sea of signs and symbols. And when we use signs and symbols, we can pull out of that well. And that's what our intuition is, because the collective unconscious is shared by all of us. So when we reach into it, we can learn things about ourselves, about our relationships, about decisions that we need to make. And we're getting out of our own heads, that we're just on this like cycle of intellectualizing everything. So we're really tapping into our inner abundance and our inner potential to create a world without our ego saying, don't do that, don't do that.
I love that you brought this up, because I think, you're talking about the collective unconscious, but what we're dealing a lot now in our political sphere is this huge contrast that we're seeing in our collective conscious. So it's so beautiful to remember that at the end of the day, regardless of this massive contrast we're seeing in the world around us, that you can always tap into this collective unconscious, which at the core of our unconscious, our collective unconscious, we all have the same understandings. It's
absolutely
beautiful.
And that's where our truth.
Tarot is the answer to world peace.
I'm with you, sister. It's true though, because we get outside of our ideologies and our belief systems, and we really tap into a universal truth. And the whole, of course, I'm a little bit evangelical about the tarot because it's what I do, but I believe that the whole of human history can be based in 78 cards of the tarot. Every encounter that we have, every heartache, every hope, every happy ending that we have for ourselves is contained in all of these cards. And it was thought that these cards were used not really as a tool to tell our fortune, but to really as a meditative tool to understand this is the process of self-development. This is the process of becoming ourselves, of really understanding who we are. So as much as we can use this as a game or a pastime, it's also really a meditative tool to understand the human experience. And kids can use this too, because in a microcosm, they go through all of the same things that we go through.
They do.
And it might even be magnified because they don't have as many of the coping mechanisms that we have.
Absolutely. And on that same line, that their problems feel just as big to them as ours do to us. And by giving them the tools, like tarot, like so many other great tools that are out there, by giving them the tools now to deal with their child-sized problems, it's going to do nothing but help them as they move into adulthood. It can only help.
Yes. And the great thing I love about tarot cards is every kid has played Go Fish or Old Maid or War. So it's a tool that kids understand. You can pull out a deck of cards and it looks like a game. It looks fun. It's not, let's sit down and have a talk about a thing. Right. It's, hey, let's play with some cards.
I just realized somebody needs to create the Sex Talk Tarot deck.
Oh my goodness. The Birds and the Bees deck.
There you go.
But I think that's a great idea because we can just look at these pictures and start having a conversation. And it feels exciting because it does go into some of that active imagination. And what I love about cards is our intuition runs very parallel with our imagination. And when we're first learning to tap into our intuition, it can feel weird going, am I making this up? Is this real? But they run parallel to each other. So the more we engage our imagination, the more we are curious and we say, what if? We have that childlike mind, the more intuition comes up for us. And that's true with kids as well. So when you can start just flipping over cards and letting kids really take direction and shuffling the cards themselves and learning how to pick out, different cards and flip for themselves, it's very empowering for them.
I have to tell you, my oldest daughter has really embraced tarot. It doesn't always tell her what she wants, and she already recognizes that it's not always giving her the answers she thinks she wants. But we were going through something where she was like, I think I'd like to pull a card just to see if it's going to affirm what I'm feeling. So she pulled the card and she was like, I don't like that card. I don't want that card. I don't even remember what it was at this point or why we were pulling cards. And so we tucked it back in. She shuffled the deck back up. And then I spread the card out for her. I was like, okay, pick a card. And guess what? Same card, picked the exact same card. So we had this really interesting discussion, even more so about how our intuition knows and how the energy knows, and how even despite what this physical card might say, it was this great lesson about what her intuition was telling her. So it's really amazing stuff.
And one of the things I love about that story is that's how life is. We don't always get the answers that we want. But with the tarot, what we can always do is, okay, we pull a card. Oh, I don't like that. So then we can say, what do I need to help me move through this? And then we pull another card. And so there's always a solution. There's problem and there's solution. Tarot is never a dead end where it's like, oh, your life is going to suck. Goodbye. You know, it's not like a magic 8-ball.
Right.
We can always say, okay, that's a thing. I don't like that. That's sticky. How can I overcome this? How can I move through this? So then we can ask the deck, I don't like this. What should I do about it?
I love that when you do spreads in tarot, there's oftentimes, even the simplest of spreads, it's like, here's where you've come from, this is where you are now, and this is what you can do to help yourself down your path. There's always kind of helping you with your understanding of where you've been, kind of defining the big elements of why you are here now. And then, you know what, let's give you some tools to send you on your way kind of way. And it gives you a lot of hope.
It does give you hope. And I think so many people have fear surrounding the tarot. And what I love to tell people is, here we live in the mountains. So when you drive in the mountains, we see these signs that say, beware of falling rocks. Now, if we stopped and didn't go down every road that said, beware of falling rocks, we would never get to see all of the beautiful scenery that comes at the other side of the road.
Or we'd be so busy looking for the falling rocks that we would run into oncoming traffic.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
We drive ourselves into our own new route of trouble.
Yes. So if we see a card that's the equivalent of beware of falling rocks, it doesn't mean a rock's going to hit you or hit on you, and derail you. It's just saying, okay, the path that you're traveling down has this potential for this. And so what I hope to do with tarot, and what I hope everyone does, is that it alleviates us from this fear to say, okay, this is an obstacle that's coming up, but an obstacle is not going to stop us. It's just going to let us be aware of what's happening so we can move through it in the best possible way.
Let's move on and talk about how can we find a tarot deck? Because I know that when I was shopping for decks, I might actually have to go up and show everybody everything that I have, because I still don't even have a deck that I'm in love with. And some of the decks that I've gotten because I think my kids might like them. So I'd love to hear more about how you actually find a deck. And while you start on that, I'm going to go grab all of my bazillion.
So I, just like Leah, I probably have 50 decks that I use, and a lot of them I collect for art, and some of them I collect to use. One of the things I love about tarot decks and oracle decks, and we'll talk about the difference between those, is that there's decks for everyone. I think with kids, one of the different types of decks that I like using are actually decks that are centered around animals, because we all have special affinities with animals, and we can all find the magic that exists within animals. So a couple of decks that are great, and these are actually not tarot decks, but oracle decks. This is the Wild Unknown Animal Spirit deck. And then this is one called the Animal Totem Tarot.
I love that you have those, because the last deck that I bought was specifically for my kids, and we also got Spirit Animal deck.
Yes.
So it's kids love animals, so kind of like these animal decks are so perfect for kids.
And the great thing with oracle decks, and as a practitioner of tarot, sometimes I get a little snobby about oracle decks, but what I love about oracle decks is there isn't a rhyme or reason to it. You can just pull one card. And oracle decks don't have those two pieces like we talked about with the tarot. So it'll just be sort of a collection of affirmations or images. What I love about animal decks is because that every animal has sort of a light side and a shadow side. So you can look at a badger or a zebra and say, okay, what are the great attributes of this? And how can I feel excited and empowered and identify with this? And then we can look at sort of the shadow aspects and say, okay, what are the things I want to make sure I don't embody about this? And so it's a great way to sort of identify ourselves with something external to us and really find the beauty in that. So I think animals are great. Some oracle card decks, like you said, the ones with the tiny messages on it, was it angels or fairies?
Angel cards.
Angel cards.
Yeah, I think.
Those can be really great. Some of the pitfalls of them are that they're overly positive. So if you pull a card that says, all of your dreams will come true, that feels great in that 5 minutes. But then tomorrow when all of your dreams don't come true, is it kind of going like, Oh man.
I agree. Like the deck that my kids have, it was great when they were really, really young and they weren't in that developmental stage of their life where they were really so much more aware of these more complicated dynamics in human existence. But I found that as they did reach kind of those ages of reason, that the really simplistic positive cards weren't really helping them address, like we were talking about, like for kids, their problems are really big and very real for them. And for some kids, they are dealing with very adult size issues. And it almost seemed like the simplicity of the cards was almost undermining their ability to address some of their bigger issues within their lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just probably depending on their developmental stage and where they're going and what they're going through, it's probably.
Absolutely. I also love, and I think your bigger deck probably has this too, but I love that oftentimes the tarot decks come with a book to kind of help you understand the cards a little bit. So when you are brand new, so you're not constantly having to Google every single card, which I still kind of do sometimes. But the books that come with the decks are often really helpful and a quick little guide to help you understand what you're pulling just a little bit better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's fantastic. But there are so many decks to look through and it can be difficult.
Yes.
And sometimes the deck that we think that we want isn't the one that's for us. So
which is what's happened too. Can we talk?
Yes.
This one is a gift. This one's so complicated. Have you seen this one?
I have that deck. Yes.
So complicated for me. Maybe you're going to have to help me use this one because it's like a 7-step process before you even start to work with the cards. So, I mean, you definitely have to do a little bit of research. This one I got because it's all positive, and sometimes there's days where we just need a lift me up and we don't really want to do really deep introspection, but we do want to have just that little bit of extra hope. So we got this one because it's called the Good Tarot because it's pretty much only good news. So this is not an everyday deck for us, but on the days that we just feel like we want to lean into positivity a little bit more, almost more like affirmations. Really. And then this was the very first one I bought because I wasn't fully invested in tarot. So I bought it on Amazon and I don't like it a whole lot. But this is the one that I use the most, but I'm not in love with it. Again, it comes with the little book so you can kind of understand. And I think I'm a snob. I think I don't like it because I don't like the pictures.
And it's so hard because if they don't talk to you, they don't talk to you.
It is a great size for my kids, though, for their hands.
That is fantastic.
So tell us, when you're looking for a deck, what draws you to a deck more immediately? Is it because you've heard about it word of mouth, or do you open up the box and look at the pictures?
Sometimes I am a sucker for the art and I get pulled in by the art. But there are some decks, like this one I think is called the tattoo deck. And so it looks like traditional tattoos that you might get. So some of them are beautiful and some of them are a little cartoony, but it can be difficult. The deck that I work with most often and the deck that I love is based off of the most popular tarot deck in America, which is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. If you're looking for a basic, I don't even want to say run up the mill because it has so much magic in it, but if you're looking for a basic deck, the Rider-Waite or the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is the one that you're going to get.
So it's like a good starter deck.
It's a great starter deck. It's the one that you've probably seen me shuffling from. Anytime if you Google meaning, you're probably going to get that meaning based off of the Rider-Waite or the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. So,
I've seen that name around a lot, and I'm not really thorough. Like, I'm not a very avid tarot person yet. I'm working on it.
Yes,
but I've seen that name around a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what I love about the images in these cards is that they are traditional, but they do look like a fairy tale book. If you're flipping through a book of fairy tales, and some of us might be worried like, oh, this isn't modern, this isn't cute, because there's Hello Kitty decks.
Well, and then do you mind if we hold one up? Because I feel like the images in this remind me of the old books when they used to make whole plates where they would screen the pictures. They would like print the pictures the old ink style. And this is what these I'm going to have to kind of get up in there. Can you guys see that okay? That's what these cards remind me of. So these must be like kind of historically.
And there's, I'll refrain from getting too in depth about it, but they are actually taken from old lithographs and, prints like that used to tell tales of morality in Europe, kind of around the Middle Ages. So, but they're fun. I think they're colorful and they do a very good job of representing some of the things in the deck. So this is the card of the sun. They're colorful cards. They have a lot of imagery in them. And I feel like you maybe can't go wrong with sort of an introductory deck.
Do you feel like everybody in the family has to have their own deck?
Ooh, what a good question.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on what you want to use it for. like you said, when you were talking about using it with your kids, you can definitely have a family deck. Okay, we have a family question, or we're all working through something.
I like
Let's
that.
pull a card. It's our family deck.
I like that a lot.
If you have a deck that you want to work with just for yourself, I mean, I think it's totally fine. Some kids may want to have ownership over their own deck, and I think that would be great. So it really depends on what you want to foster with the use of that deck.
Now, I know we've done a video about shuffling your decks and storing your decks and cleaning your decks, which I will share in the Facebook group. If you guys aren't in the Facebook yet, join so that you can catch all these extra videos and stuff. But we did just record that. So if we are all sharing a deck as a family, do you recommend that you guys clear the deck in between? Is there, I know some of the ways we talked about clearing the decks were using the moon and salt and things that can take a little bit more time. Is there a quicker way to kind of clear the deck in between people using it?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So I'll give you the little insider industry tips.
Okay.
So sometimes if we're all doing readings for each other and we're passing a deck of cards around, sometimes I'll give them a little thump.
Kind of like knock the energy
off, or I'll blow along the sides of the deck.
Okay.
And it has that same feeling. When I start doing a reading for somebody, so if you're passing it around, what I'll do is I'll hold the cards in my hand, and you'll be my guinea pig. I will say, please take your left hand and place it on top of the deck. And just take about 3 or 4 deep breaths. So as she's doing these deep breaths, the cards are getting aligned to her energy. I'm getting aligned to her energy. And we're telling the cards, okay, this is a reading for her. This reading is going to be for her. It's not for the person 5 minutes ago or for the person after her. Thank you very much. So this shows, and I can feel the cards are charged. They want to talk to you right now. And that's a great way to handle that when you're mixing cards with a lot of energy.
I love that for a couple reasons. One, because I noticed we've been kind of going all morning already recording, and just taking that time to breathe a little bit just totally reset me in the middle of the workship, which I can imagine doing that as a family, and just taking that time to breathe is going to offer so much for your family outside of just recharging and clearing the deck. But I also love that it's this element of the intentionality behind it. I mean, all of these little things that you're doing, the picking the cards, the clearing the cards, so much of it is that intention that you're putting behind it. And so taking just that moment to be like, all right, we're setting our intention that this is clearing the cards is kind of a great practice, not even just with tarot.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have a question for you, because I'm curious, with having kids and having so many toys around the house, how do you differentiate a toy versus a tool? Like, how do you have, if you have playing cards, how do you tell them that these are different than your toys?
Well, isn't that a loaded question?
Oh.
I think there's a couple things. I really embraced several years ago minimalist thinking in my parenting. I read a book called Simplicity Parenting. And in the book, they talk about how the less toys that you have in the home, the less your child has to mentally declutter on a regular basis. And the more they're able to really find different purposes for toys and not just always play with them for the one intended purpose that it may have been created for. So having that simplicity in the home has made us treat our toys very differently. So we have a lot more respect for the toys that we have, and we care for them a lot more. And we have more conversations surrounding the toys that we have, because there's so much less than what maybe some other kids may have. There's less than what they have. I mean, even when you look at children's classrooms, usually toys are they're very well organized. There's not a ton of them. And so that's made a really big difference in how my children interact with the belongings in our home. I've also made a point of not ever really minimizing their abilities at home. And so they use all of our kitchen tools. I just teach them how to be safe with them. They are welcome. I have a whole lot of antique books, and those have always, once they were old enough to know, like granted when they're 2 and like sticking everything in their mouth, they didn't play with my antique books. But as soon as they were old enough to really understand that you take special care with certain things, it's never been where it was just a conversation that happened one day. It's been a slow growing process where they knew that they were honored as a member of the family, and they were welcome to participate and interact with the belongings in the home. And that's kind of been the same way with the tarot cards, where they've never really treated it's never really been treated like a game or a toy, because the intention that we set behind it was that it was it was a tool to serve them, and like we do moon rituals and stuff too. And it's the energy and the mood that you bring to it as a parent, because your children are always mirroring your neurons. They're always modeling your energy. And so as a parent, it's like that energy that you bring to it really impacts the response that you're going to get from your kids with it too. So there's the really long answer to that question.
I love what you talk about, though. You said something about moon rituals. And I think in our busy lives, the tarot is an amazing opportunity to create a little bit of ritual. So if you want to sit down with your kids and make it special, I always say the tarot is a tool. It doesn't have more power than we do. They're just pieces of paper. With that said, though, there's a lot of magic inherent in it. And I think if we can bring some of that magic into the lives of little people, if we want to sit down and maybe turn off a couple lights or light a candle and say, this is a special thing we're going to do, it takes us and it creates that sense of, okay, we're going to do something important. And then the messages that we receive from those cards carry more weight with us throughout the rest of our day.
Right. And I love what you say about magic too, because so often in childhood, there is this enormous amount of magic with fairies and gnomes and mythical creatures and Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. And then as we grow into adulthood, that's just kind of all stripped away. And I love that still having that faith in your own power, that faith in your intuition, the faith in the universe, the power of the moon, the power of the tarot. It keeps that magic in our lives. And I know I keep talking about it, but what brought tarot into my life is really seeking tools that were providing hope for me during really, really hard times. And I've found that it's really helped bring magic back into not only my life, but our family as a whole. And it's magic doesn't have to be pretend. Just saying.
True. I love it. And this is what I would call real magic. There's all kinds of magic in the world, but what I love to use the tarot for is not to say this is what's going to happen. This and this and this will happen because, I mean, we could have conversations about fate and free will and all of that. But at the end of the day, the tarot is really a tool to help empower us to make decisions and move through the sticky places in our life. And that's where the real magic is to say, oh, this spread, and we'll talk about spreads later, this spread really does mirror what's happening in my life. And so now we can draw cards to say, okay, well, what do we do about this? How do we move through it? So it's an empowering tool. It's not a tool that takes away our power and says, oh, this will happen to you and this and this. It gives us a way to move forward and take more control over our lives.
Absolutely. I agree completely. On that note, do you find that there's, I know you've talked about doing readings with children and with your niece and stuff. So have you found that there's a way to introduce children to tarot that's easy for them to understand? And
absolutely. The beautiful thing is about the cards is that they're very self-explanatory. So when you want to introduce kids to the tarot, you can say, hey, I've got these cards. They're tarot cards. There's some pictures on them. And the pictures can tell us, sometimes they can tell us about ourselves and the world around us. My dad had this fortune-telling card game and book when I was little called Gong Hee Fat Choi. And it's a mouthful, exactly. And it was using regular playing cards to kind of predict your future. So he sort of introduced it to me as a game. And it was one of the first sort of, cartomancy is the art of using cards to kind of divine things. So this was my first introduction to cartomancy, your fun word of the day. And I really just saw it as anything else, like, oh, this is a cool thing. It would be like a workbook that he brought home or any other game. So I used it in that way. I did have a respect for what it was, mostly because I think it was a book from the 1920s. But I use it as, oh, this is just sort of a fun new thing. So you can do it that way, or you can create a little bit of ritual around it and say, okay, these cards are going to help us learn more about ourselves, about what's going on. They can give us messages. I think it's important to not give too much power to the cards, but it's as we work with the cards together, we are going to learn some things.
I love what you say about not giving too much power to the cards. Something that I've done with my kids is, my older daughter in the last 2 years has started to have, she's 9, almost 10. And so she's had a lot more social struggles with her friends in the last couple of years because they've all reached that developmental stage where there's just a lot more of figuring out who they are and what they like and what they want to be and how they want to interact with others, and finding that the friendships that they've had for the last several years don't always correspond with this new idea of themselves. And so she will come home and she'll be frustrated with different dynamics in her life. And we will, before we even turn to the cards, I'll say, well, what is your gut telling you? And we'll kind of talk about first what her intuition is saying, kind of unwind some of her internal thoughts about everything. And sometimes she'll ask me what I think. And as much as I want to give her all of my years of wisdom, instead what we usually do is say, well, should we dabble with the tarot cards a little bit and see if they're affirming for you, let you know if you're on the right track. Maybe it'll offer you some insight. And so it's become a tool where we kind of first make sure where she stands on the intuition aspect of how she's feeling about it. And then just kind of using the tarot to validate what she really kind of already knows, just like we all do. Like we really already have all of the answers. We either don't want to hear them. We haven't really quite figured, our consciousness hasn't really quite figured it out yet, or we haven't even really tried to dig deep enough to figure it out. Yeah,
absolutely. And I would say, as a tarot reader, this happens to me every single day, where intuition will come. I will receive information, but since people are paying me for tarot readings, I'll kind of go, okay, I'm getting this and this and this and this. And then I'll flip over some cards and go, oh, okay, this does reflect that. So you and she are doing exactly what I do every single day.
Yes. Halfway to being expert.
There you go. One thing I was going to mention too, if your kids really do find that they love tarot and they want to create a deck of their own, there are a couple of decks where it's basically a coloring book, and you can color in your own tarot cards.
Oh, that's so cool.
So there are some really great, and they're the traditional sort of Rider-Waite cards, but you can color them in, and the book gives you suggestions like pink symbolizes this, or you can let them go to town and create whatever they want to create. So they can really have some more ownership over their own decks.
That's really cool. I know we've talked about a ton of different like decks and tools and stuff. So we will throw together a post at somewhere along the lines. Well, we will just go ahead and link a lot of these things so you guys don't have to hit the ground on Amazon and try to find all of the stuff, but we'll definitely link your deck.
Awesome.
I think the coloring book is a fantastic idea. So we'll link that as well. And then some of your other decks that you brought that are your favorites, like the spirit animal decks and stuff. We'll link all of that so that you guys can find it. As we're wrapping up, I know there are a few of you on live today. Do you have any specific questions before we wrap up the workshop? It's so weird when there's nobody talking and we're just talking at the camera. I don't see any comments coming through, but we are doing a couple mini videos that we will be releasing. One of them is how to clear and store and charge your deck. If you're not in the Facebook group, join it. If you're not on Facebook, definitely subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Abundant Parent, because I release all of these little mini videos there. So you can always still get all the information there on the channel. We also did one about how to deal with the scarier cards in tarot and talk to your kids about those. And I think we're doing another one about pulling specific cards for manifestation, but we haven't recorded that one yet. So be sure to check in for all of those. Also, Rachel is generously offering a discount on her services as a gift to you for being a subscriber to the Abundant Parent membership. She's offering 20% off of her readings. How long is your reading for?
How long do the readings last? They can last usually around 20 minutes.
Okay.
They're online.
So her reading, it's 20% off her reading. You can go to her website, quinlantarot.com, and use the gift code ABUNDANT to get your discount on the reading. You also do a lot of other things besides tarot. Like you do Reiki, did I hear?
Yes, I'm a Reiki practitioner, a shamanic practitioner. So using energy to move things through. So if you're local or long distance, we can set one of those up as well. We'll also be doing some posts, I think, throughout the week about tarot spreads, how you can have different spreads with your children.
And I think we're planning on doing like 4 weeks of spreads.
Yes.
So each week I'll post a new spread that Rachel's helped us put together that you can use with your kids. So definitely check back in. Just because the workshop is over today, it doesn't mean that there's not more information coming your way. You are going to be so full of tarot knowledge.
Do we have a hand raise here? Is that what that is?
Hey, Esther, I unmuted you. Did you have a question? You're welcome to ask it.
Yes, I do have a question. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, I'm very new to tarot, and I wonder if there's some kind of easy to understand primer that you guys can point me to understand tarot in general a little bit more.
Absolutely. So if you're very new to tarot, there's a great website that I love, and I think you maybe even mentioned this. It's called Biddy, BIDDY.com. She's fantastic. I think she might be from New Zealand or Australia, but she has really straightforward depictions of what the cards are and what they mean. And she's got some great online classes, and it's very straightforward. You don't have to buy a ton of books. That's one of the things I used many years ago when I was learning.
And I'm kind of learning as well. I'm not really thorough with tarot either. I'm probably maybe just barely maybe above where you are, maybe at the same level. I've used Biddy Tarot a lot as I'm pulling cards to read the descriptions, because she does a really fantastic job of giving, for every card, she gives a brief overview of the card, and then she tells you what the card means in the upright position, which means if you pull the card and the imagery looks up and down. And then she gives a second description of how to interpret the card if you pull the card and it's flipped upside down. And it's really helped me to interpret cards as I'm pulling them. And then I know we're also going to be posting specific spreads that you can use. And I would think that was a great opportunity, that if you're using the spreads that Rachel's putting together and you have questions about specific cards, you could comment in the comment section of the spreads posts about questions you might have about it. And we'll definitely try to make a point of answering all of those as you go along and as you're really kind of grasping it and learning. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for asking. Do you have any other questions?
Not at this time, but
Okay,
once I get more familiar, I might.
Perfect.
There's another book that I really like. My mom turned me on to it, and it's newly published. It's called The Kitchen Table Tarot. And so it's really basic. It's kind of funny and light, so there isn't a lot of the gravitas associated with it. And you can kind of just flip and get different definitions, and it's very funny and sweet. So it's a great beginner's book too if you want something to tote around with you.
Does it have recipes too?
Oh, I wish it did. That's a good idea. Tarot cookbook.
There you go. All right. Well, you guys, like I said, you can find Rachel on QuinlanTarot.com to submit your code to get your discount. She's also not on Facebook. She does have a Facebook business page, but she's not actively on Facebook. So if you want to follow her on social media, I highly recommend following her on Instagram. She has a great social media page on Instagram. Of course, you can find her on the Abundant Parent Community workshops. She will be around the next few weeks sharing tarot spreads and stuff. And then outside of that, if you have Facebook, join the group, because I'll be posting everything in there. At the bare minimum, look out for my emails, and then definitely on YouTube, I'll be posting all the extra videos that Rachel and I have put together. Thank you so much for being here. This was so much fun.
Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
Thanks. All right, you guys, we'll catch you all later.
Bye.
Bye.